Hello, welcome to the Mayor Best Friends YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. To my right is a man by the name of Lynn Fans. Would you like to say hello?
Hello there.
Great. Now, before we start our topic, I would like to mention a disclaimer. This video is not going to be a tutorial video. This video is just going to explain certain concepts so that way you can breed a better breed. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into our topic, breeding. And before you start breeding, you have to know the locations of each daycare. In Kanto, you can go to Island 4. In Hoenn, you can go to Route 117, which is west of Mauville. And in Unova, you can go to Route 3, which is north of Stralaton City. And you're at these locations. And you do want to breed, but at the same time, you want to guarantee those IVs that each parent is giving out. So, how do you do that? Very simple. You can do that by buying braces from the daycare. Now, where can you get these braces? These braces you can obtain from the lady by the table, and it does apply to all the regions. So just go inside the daycare and talk to the lady by the table, and she should be able to assist you with the bracelets that you can give to your Pokemon. The braces that she has on sale are the Power Weight, the Power Bracer, the Power Belt, the Power Lenses, the Power Band, and the Power Anklet. Power Weight carries HP, Power Bracer carries attack, Power Belt carries defense, Power Lens gives special attack, Power Band gives special defense, and Power Anklet gives speed. You can buy those bracelets at a cost of 10k each. So you may have the braces, but you may say, man, you know, I have a pretty awesome nature on my Pokemon. How do I transfer the nature from parent to a baby? Well, you can obtain the Everstone. Now, you can obtain the Everstone by thieving a Geodude, Graveler, Regenrola, or a Boldore. Feel free to use Thief on either one of those Pokemon and you can get an Everstone. Or if you don't want to thief one of those Pokemon, you can always purchase an Everstone from the global trade link. So the lowest price for an Everstone right now is about 9k. So feel free to buy an Everstone if you need to lock in a nature from a certain Pokemon. You may get the Everstone, but you may be wondering what nature would be fitting for my Pokemon. And there are a lot of different natures. In fact, I'm going to list them right here. But I went ahead and I put a little star beside the popular natures. So, Adamant, Timid, Jolly, and Modest. Adamant is plus attack, minus special attack. Timid is plus speed, minus attack. Jolly is plus speed, minus special attack. And Modest is plus special attack and minus attack. If you want an tutorial on what each nature does, I'd be happy to do that. First of all, let's go ahead and get the no status changes out of the way. Hardy, docile, serious, bashful, and quirky. Those natures provide the no status changes. Let's go ahead and talk about the natures that do provide stat changes. Lonely, which is plus attack minus defense. Brave is plus attack minus speed. Adamant is plus attack minus special attack. That is a popular nature. Naughty, plus attack minus special defense. Bold is plus defense minus attack. Relaxed is plus defense minus speed. Impish is plus defense minus special attack. Lax is plus defense and minus special defense. Timid, which is a popular nature, plus speed minus attack. Hasty, plus speed minus defense. Jolly, which is a popular nature, plus speed minus special attack. Naive, plus speed minus special defense. Modest, which is a popular nature plus special attack minus attack, mild plus special attack minus defense, quiet plus special attack minus speed, rash plus special attack minus special defense, calm plus special defense minus attack, gentle plus special defense minus defense, sassy plus special defense minus speed, careful plus special defense and minus special attack. And if you want to know the functionality of your Pokemon's nature, then all you have to do is just pop up your Pokemon and then hover over the adamant, for example. So plus attack minus special attack. So that is a good example of what your nature does. You may know about natures, you may know about Everstones, and you may know about braces. Now you have to know a little bit about egg groups. Now I'm going to go ahead and list all the egg groups here. Monster, Water A, Bug, Flying, Field, Fairy, Plant, Humanoid, Water C, Mineral, Chaos, Water B, Ditto, Dragon, Cannot Breed, and Genderless. Genderless Pokemon can breed with each other as long as the Pokemon is in the same evolution line. For example, take Magnemite and Magnezone. Those two Pokemon can breed with each other. And you may be wondering about transferring IVs. You may be thinking to yourself, I don't want to spend money on a brace if I don't have to. Well, if both parents have the same IV for a stat, then a brace is not needed to carry the stat. However, this does not apply to nature. Let's say that you bred your Pokemon, but the Pokemon does not have the ability that you envisioned. All you need is an ability pill, and the ability pill lets you change the ability of a Pokemon. This pill cannot give your Pokemon a hidden ability, however. And each ability pill is 35k. So you may have your ability situated, you may have your nature situated, but you may say to me, best friends, I have my breed, but it doesn't have the right hidden power. Do I have to rebreed this Pokemon to make sure that it has the right hidden power? The answer is, well, you used to, but you don't have to anymore. Thanks to a new mechanic that the PokeMMO development team has implemented called gems. And your Pokemon's hidden power can be changed by using 20 gems of that type without any IVs being altered. So if you want to change your hidden power to hidden power grass, then all you need is 20 grass gems.
So to create these type gems, you will require one mysterious gem and another item, which is typically a type boosting item. These vary between the different types you are looking for, and the gem you create will be the same type as the type boosting item you choose to combine with the mysterious gem. For example, if I wanted to create a fire gem, I would need to get one mysterious gem, and I would need to go to the bag, I would click use, and then I would select the fire type boosting item, which is the charcoal, and in doing so I would be able to get 5 fire gems. So I'm just going to read out quickly what the type boosting item you would need for each different type. So for the normal type, I would need the silk scarf, fire type, charcoal, water type, mystic water, electric type, magnet, grass, miracle seed, ice, never melt ice, fighting, black belt, poison, poison barb, ground, soft sand, flying, sharp beak, psychic, twisted spoon, bug, silver powder, rock,
hard stone,
ghost, spell tag, dragon, dragon fang, black glasses to create 5 dark gems.
And last but certainly not least, for the steel type, you're going to need a metal coat.
So one question you may be asking is, how do I obtain this mysterious gem? Well, there are 2 primary ways to obtain the mysterious gem. Like most items, you can buy the mysterious gem from the GTL for a fairly low price. It is around 5k when I last checked. Another way you can obtain the mysterious gem is through phenomenon in the Unova region. So how you would do this, you would go to different phenomena which exist in the Unova region, and by battling and engaging with the phenomenon, there is a chance, but not guaranteed, that you may receive a mysterious gem.
Right, and also the phenomena can take the form of a bubble in the water. It can also take form of shaky grass, or it can be a dust cloud, or it can be a shadow on the ground.
So in total, you would need 20 of these gems. So essentially, in total, you'd need 4 mysterious gems, 4 type boosting items. You would then use the mysterious gems to give you 5 of those items each time. Doing that 4 times will give you 20 gems in total. And once you have the 20 gems, you then need to go to the bag and then use them on the Pokemon with the hidden power you want to change. And in doing so, the hidden power, as you'll be able to see, will be changed to the type that you intend to have.
Yeah, so for example, this Charizard is Hidden Power Ground. If I did not like Hidden Power Ground, then I can use 20 gems. Just use them in the bag. Some people ask if you need an NPC to change the hidden powers. You do not need an NPC to change those hidden powers. All you need is 20 gems, and use those gems to change the hidden power. That's all you need. You may know about abilities. You may know about the nature. You may know about IVs, and you may know about the hidden powers now. But you may say, you know, I want to make my breeds better. How do I check for better breeds that can be used to make my breed better? Well, on PokeMMO, we have a service called the Global Trade Link, and you can do an advanced search and just put in the egg group that you're looking for and see if the Pokemon fits that egg group. And then all you gotta do is just put in the number of IVs, so 31. So for example, if you're looking for 31 here, a blank here, 31. And I'm going to show you just how easy this is. So you can look for, I'm just going to leave this part blank. So here it is. You can go ahead and do the lowest price. You can get a pretty low price. You can go ahead and cater it to a specific egg group. So Water A, for example. So Mantine is on sale for 130k if you need a Mantine breed. And as of this taping, both of us do not have any listing of any Pokemon here on the Global Trade Link. So if you buy any Pokemon that is here, then we are not going to profit off of that. So now you know an easy way to obtain breeders. You know how to change abilities. You know the natures. You know how to change hidden powers, and you know about the genderless breeding mechanics. And now you may be asking yourself, how do I get egg moves on a certain Pokemon? And that's a very good question. All you have to do is just look in the dex and see if there is any Pokemon that has any egg moves listed. So Salamence, for example, if you see where it says egg, then you know that you can only obtain that move by an egg move. So Salamence learns Hydro Pump by an egg move, and it learns Dragon Dance by an egg move. And Lynn, would you like to describe egg moves in a little bit more detail?
Absolutely. So egg moves are only moves that can be obtained, as Best Friend says, through breeding. In some cases, you may be trying to build competitive Pokemon, and you may want an egg move on your Pokemon. So the principle behind egg moves is that you can only obtain the move by breeding your breeder Pokemon with another Pokemon in the same egg group that has the egg move you want. For example, using the Salamence example, if I wanted a Salamence with the egg move Dragon Dance, I would need to find a Pokemon that both shares the same egg group and also can learn the egg move normally, e.g. through level up. So for the Dragon egg group that Salamence is in, I can look up other Pokemon in the same egg group, which is the Dragon egg group, and one of the Pokemon I see that can also learn Dragon Dance normally, which is Gyarados, which can learn Dragon Dance via level up. So what I do, I can take my Magikarp breeder, I can evolve it to Gyarados, then I can either level it up to level 46 or whatever level it is, or I can use the Heart Scale move relearner, or Big Mushrooms one if you prefer that, to teach it the move Dragon Dance. Once it has the move Dragon Dance, you then breed it with the Salamence, and then the baby Bagon that is produced will have the Dragon Dance egg move. It is also worth noting some useful advice is that a Pokemon that is very useful for carrying egg moves is the Pokemon Smeagol. So Smeagol is in the field egg group, and by using Sketch, it is able to sketch any single move. So you can use that to speed up the egg move process of other Pokemon in the field egg group, which may be difficult to do. So for example, if I wanted to sketch the move Destiny Bond, for instance, on Houndoom, if I wanted to get the egg move Destiny Bond onto my Houndoom, I would need to get my Houndoom/Houndour breeder and then breed it with a Smeagol that I have sketched Destiny Bond onto. This is quicker than chaining between egg groups, such as using a Delibird, which is also doable, but when breeding you want to minimize time so you can work as fast as possible and with the least amount of hassle. However, for some egg groups, e.g. for those not in field that don't have a Smeagol-like equivalent, you may find yourself having to do what we call chain breeding, where you will have to breed a Pokemon between different egg groups. So in some cases, the normal method of obtaining an egg move by breeding one Pokemon that doesn't know the egg move that you want to get the egg move on with a Pokemon that has the egg move but is in the same egg group is sometimes not possible. When these situations are not possible, such as when you cannot find a Pokemon in the same egg group that can breed with the Pokemon and can learn the move, you will need to do what we call chain breeding. So to chain breed will essentially involve more than two Pokemon. So using Chimecho as an example, let's say we wanted to get the egg move Cosmic Power, which is a useful move in boosting Chimecho's defense and special defense stat. So what I do is if I cannot find any Pokemon in the Chaos egg group of Chimecho that can learn the egg move normally, I start to look for other Pokemon in the same egg group that also learn the egg move but are in multiple egg groups. For example, looking at all the different Pokemon that can learn egg move, I find out that Castform is one of these Pokemon. It is also in the Fairy egg group as well as the Chaos egg group. So what I do now is I focus on Castform. I want to look for Pokemon in the Fairy egg group that can learn Cosmic Power normally, e.g. through level up. So looking at the Pokemon in the Fairy egg group that can learn Cosmic Power, I see that Clefairy is indeed the only one that can learn it via level up. So what I do is I get a Clefairy, teach it Cosmic Power through level up, and I then breed it with my Castform to produce a male Castform that knows the Cosmic Power as it has essentially been carried onto it as you would a normal egg move. And now that you have a Castform with the egg move, you then breed it with our final Pokemon, which in this case is Chimecho. And since the Castform already has the egg move, it will carry on the egg move to Chimecho, as it can also learn Cosmic Power as an egg move, and they are both in the same egg group.
Essentially, it's a little more complicated, but it can be done. It can be done. There's just a lot more Pokemon involved.
Most important information you would probably need to know for chain breeding is you'd need to know the egg move of the Pokemon, which you can find out through looking at the Pokedex in the game. And then you need to find a list of Pokemon that can learn the egg move you're interested in. And then once you have that, you then need to look for Pokemon that can also learn the egg move through breeding, but also have a different egg group. This is the key point. It needs to have a different egg group that you can then look for a Pokemon that normally learns it via level up. And essentially using the other Pokemon, such as the Castform in this case, as an intermediate Pokemon between the breed. Chain breeding may sound a little bit complicated at first, but it is luckily only something that doesn't need to be done for every single egg move and only applies to a smaller number of cases. but it is something that does become easier as you breed more. And as with practice, you will be able to feel comfortable chain breeding egg moves.
Hello. As I was working on this breeding self-help video, I realized that I forgot to talk about locations as to where you can catch some of these Pokemon in certain egg groups. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight into this topic. And before I dive into this topic, I have to give you a disclaimer. These locations are based upon what I feel is convenient, and also I made sure that these locations have the highest yield of that egg group available. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight into these egg group locations. Field, go to Rust Turf Tunnel. There's 100% yield of Whismur, which is in the region of Hoenn. Monster, you can go to Rust Turf Tunnel, which has 100% yield of Whismur, which is in the region of Hoenn. Humanoid, you can go to Route 113. There's a 70% yield of Spinda, which is in the region of Hoenn. Water A, you can surf around Veranian City. There's a 100% yield of Psyduck and Slowpoke, which is in the region of Kanto. Fairy, you can go to Route 114, which has 100% yield of Marill and Azumarill, and that is in the region of Hoenn. Make sure you surf around there at Route 114. Flying, you can go to Route 104, which has 100% yield of Wingull and Pelipper, which is in the region of Hoenn. Bug, make sure you go to Mount Moon downstairs, and there's 100% yield of Paris, which is in the region of Kanto. Grass, you can go to Mount Moon downstairs, and there's 100% yield of Paris, which is in the region of Kanto. Water B, you can surf around Sootopolis City, and there's 100% yield of Magikarp, and this is in the region of Hoenn. Mineral, and in my research, I found that if you use the move Rock Smash in Kanto or Hoenn, then you can get Geodudes and Gravelers, which are in the Mineral egg group. So technically you can get it, but it's not in a designated wild location. You have to just smash rocks and you can encounter it that way. As for Chaos, go to Celestial Tower, 2nd floor. There's 100% yield of Litwick, which is in the region of Unova. Water C, you can surf around the main part of Kanto. Don't go to the islands, just go to the main part of Kanto. You should be able to obtain Tentacool, which are in the same egg group. So 100% yield of Tentacool in just the main region of Kanto. Dragon, you can surf into Sootopolis City. There's 100% yield of Magikarp, which is in the Hoenn region. Ditto, you can go to the Desert Underpass, and there's a 50% chance that you're going to bump into a Ditto. Alright, I hope that this topic has helped you out, and let's go ahead and go back to the original program where we are about to dive into how to stack up the IVs in your breed. Take it away, Lin fans.
So if you wanted to breed a Pokemon from scratch, e.g. you would need breeder Pokemon. So these would be one Pokemon that you're intending to use for the breeding process that has at least one desirable IV. So in this case, let's assume I have a large amount of one IV breeders. So what I do is I take two Pokemon with different IVs, brace those IVs, and assuming these Pokemon must be of different genders, the opposite genders, I breed them together to get a 2 IV breeder. So the idea that you will be repeating here is you're going to be use your 1 IV breeders to make 2 IV breeders, breed your 2 IV breeders to make 3 IV breeders, then use your 3 IV breeders, bracing over in all these cases the IV that they don't share in common, because as mentioned before, IVs that are shared by both Pokemon will be carried over without needing a brace. So bracing over all these unique IVs, So I put the two free IVs together to get a 4 IV. And then usually, since most people only breed to around 5 IVs, I can then breed 2 4 IV Pokemon to make my 5 IV breeder before using a separate breeder to put a nature onto that Pokemon. So as a breeding example, I'm going to briefly walk you through how to breed a 5 IV natured Pokemon. So the first thing we do is we can break this breed into two different halves. The first half is I will need a 4 IV Pokemon that is natured and a 5 IV Pokemon that is not natured. It doesn't have to be. And of course, one of these Pokemon need to have the same species as the Pokemon you're trying to breed. So if I'm trying to breed a competitive Gyarados, one of these breeders will need to be a female Magikarp, and the other Pokemon will need to be a male Pokemon in the same egg group. So in this case, Water Bee or Dragon. So to begin with, if you're starting breeding from scratch, you may want to start breeding using 1 IV breeders. When I refer to 1 IV breeders, I'm referring to Pokemon in the same egg group that possess one useful IV. For example, it may have a 31 attack IV, which is the highest IV digit you can have. So if I'm breeding a competitive Gyarados, for instance, I don't need special attack necessarily on my Gyarados, so I'm essentially trying to get 31 HP, 31 attack, 31 defense, 31 special defense, and 31 speed. So to do that, I get my 1 IV breeders, and for example, if I have a 1 IV attack Pokemon and a 1 IV speed Pokemon, I put a brace on these Pokemon. They need to be of opposite genders. I brace the two IVs together to create a 2 IV breed. And essentially, what you need to do is repeat this process to create another 2 IV breeder that shares one stat with the first 2 IV breeder and has one different stat. Because what we are going to be doing is we are going to be using braces to brace the unique IVs, while the other IVs which are shared will be automatically carried on to the baby Pokemon, and a brace is thus not required. And we do this successively to create a 3 IV breeders by breeding 2 IV breeders together, and then a 4 IV breeders by breeding 3 IV breeders together, and then we conclude by breeding our 5 IV breeder by breeding 2 4 IV Pokemon together, of which 3 IVs would be overlap and 1 would be unique for each breeders, and they would be braced in that respective stat. This will give us a 5 IV breeder. Once we have a 5 IV breeder, we then want a nature on it. It is unlikely that from the 5 IV breeder alone, you will have a nature you are desired with, as it is you are randomly given a nature when breeding. So we continue by now having to get the 4 IV natured breeder. And by using the steps I've mentioned above, to create a 4 IV natured Pokemon, you would then similarly need a 4 IV Pokemon and a Pokemon with 3 IVs and natured. And then if we break this down into like a chain, you would need to get a 3 IV natured Pokemon, I would need a 3 IV Pokemon and a 2 IV natured Pokemon. If I want a 2 IV natured Pokemon, I need a 2 IV Pokemon with a 1 IV natured Pokemon. And essentially by doing that in steps, for example, if I find a Pokemon with 1 IV and a nature, and then I find my 2 IV Pokemon, I brace the unique stat on the 2 IV Pokemon, and I put an Everstone on the 1 IV natured Pokemon to always carry on the nature. Note that a Pokemon can only hold 1 item when breeding, and thus it is not possible to brace a stat on the 1 IV natured Pokemon. So in doing so, we have now got our 2 IV natured Pokemon. To do similar, I now need to just make a 3 IV breeder, as I mentioned, using the first steps, and put an Everstone always on the Pokemon with the nature you want to carry on, because that is what the Everstone does. In doing so, I do that successive times and I will get a 4 IV natured Pokemon. I then breed that with my 5 IV Pokemon, remembering that they have to be at least one of those. It needs to be a female of the species you want to breed and a male of a Pokemon in the same egg group that can breed with it. In doing so, I will then have my 5x31 natured Pokemon. Breeding is indeed a process that takes does take a few breeds and does take a lot of time to learn about and also to perfect, and it is definitely something that improves with practice. For those who maybe don't want to spend the money on or don't want to produce really expensive comps to start with, they may choose to start with maybe 2x31, 3x27 plus Pokemon, and they may find it more time efficient to purchase Pokemon from the GTL that already have maybe 2 or 3 IVs, which, as explained above, you may realize by looking at the charts will save you a significant number of steps. This is also why things like maybe 3 IV Pokemon, so a 3x31 Pokemon in the GTL, will cost a considerably large amount due to the useful IVs it has.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, you can use the global trade link to not have to make so many breeders. At the same time, if you want to home make your breeders, you can do that by following the graph. Keep in mind that breeding is going to be expensive, but once you get the hang of it, then breeding essentially becomes a very easy task that you can do all by yourself. Limfans and I would like to wish you well on your breeding endeavors, and if you have any questions about breeding, then you can ask them down in the comment section below. Anyways, thank you so much, Limfans, for commentating with us.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Certainly. Anyways, this is the Mayor Best Friends YouTube channel. Don't forget to comment or subscribe to my channel, like or dislike the content that you see here. And this is the Mayor Best Friends YouTube channel signing off. PokeMMO Mayor at your service. Hello. I don't usually interrupt my sign off, but I have to give a thank you to Limfans. He volunteered his time to work on this video, and I put in some of the final touches. But Limfans, on the behalf of the Mayoral Council, I would like to thank you for working on this video. Thank you. I am grateful for your work, and thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to work on this video. Thank you.